All right, guys, welcome to, I don't know what Q&A we're on, but welcome to another Q&A. You guys have questions, I have answers, at least most of the time. So let's get into them. Sorry, this is pretty short. I put up the poll this morning, so I'm probably not going to have as many questions today, but that's fine. So let's try and grip it and rip it. Best books for learning periodization and conjugate sequence. I'll pull them up right here. Science and Practice of Strength Training. Boom. Super Training. Boom. Periodization by Bompa would be my top three. Oh, I'm also going to include, I also really like Bosch's book, the Coordinative Strength Training and Coordination and Integrative Approach. That would be a close number 4, just in terms of like planning training, not like biomechanics and stuff. I mean, actually, that book in particular is actually really good, but learning how to train and plan training, those would be my top 4, at least right now. I still have plenty more books to read, so that might change in the future. How long are your macro cycles? Typically 6 months. Can you do Supermax eccentrics year-round, but with different muscles? I wouldn't recommend doing Supermax eccentrics year-round. We usually just do them at the end of our macro cycles, and then we'll get the rest of our eccentric loading in just through our jump sessions, sprinting, just doing normal squatting because there is some level of eccentric stimulus there. And they're just way too fatiguing. Like you can't do true squats, you can't do weight releaser squats all year round, and because you'll just be too fatigued. So we save them for the end of our macro cycles. We keep the beginning of the macro cycles a little bit more general, and then we'll do like our Supermax eccentrics or like our rhythm quarter squats or some sort of like velocity. Like for eccentrics, you can load them with you can do the super maximal loading with load, like greater than 100% of your 1 rep max, or you can also do them with velocity, like using bands to drop down quickly. So you can also do that eccentric type strength training with like fast eccentrics essentially. But no, yeah, we'll do them at the end of our macro cycles. You could probably get away with doing like 2 up, 1 down leg extensions or something, or even maybe a hip thrust. That's not going to be as fatiguing as a true squat. But I've also messed around with that, and even just doing a few reps of those like really cooks my quads. So it's not bad if you want to do them once a week for like a maintenance, but like if you're already doing a lot of jumping and plyometric type activity, you don't necessarily need to have them in the program all year round. But if they make your knees feel better, like they did with mine, they're something to try. But for the most part, just save them as a way to intensify your training. You don't want them to be, you don't want it to become too like, what's a word? Like, you don't want that proprioceptive staleness, as Bruce Schexnayder says. You want it to be a novel stimulus. You want it to be a good learning stimulus for the brain. So, and like motor learning stimulus, and it also helps you kind of solidify adaptations that you've gotten in the previous like 4 or 5 months. If you do them all year round, you're going to see some results, but it's going to be probably a little bit harder to continue to make those big jumps like we might see at the end of a macro cycle. Just because the stimulus isn't novel anymore, and in order to intensify it can get a little bit dangerous, so to speak. So I would just save it I would just save it to the end of your macros. What's my opinions on Dan Back's lifting ideas? It's a bit different from the Rolf Ullmann ideas. Well, Dan keeps his stuff really general. I think for the most part we shout out Dan Back, by the way. I think we're friends. I don't know if he interacts with my stuff a lot anymore, but we're bros, I think. Yeah, so he keeps things really general. He still does cleans in a lot of his programs. Like I've seen his jump sides program. So he does like some clean pulls, I think. So he does some sort of power work there. I think general strength training is fine for a lot of athletes, myself included. But Rolf Ullmann, with the population that he works with, you got to remember, he works with elite jumpers, elite sprinters. He also doesn't do his eccentric strength training like methods, his fast eccentrics all year round. Okay. Like he still has a GPP. He still wants them to be generally strong. Like I've talked with him about this before, and he wants to see like a 1.7 to a 2x body weight squat. Like he still wants to see those numbers, But yeah, with his elite guys, especially the ones that are really, really fast, then he's going to do a lot of more eccentric methods. And for his population, it works really, really well. I think we're still kind of learning how to integrate his approach with jumpers. We might be implementing more of it in the future, like doing eccentric type strength training more often. But the catch is going to be like, can we stay healthy? Are we still going to get like a good return on investment versus doing like a normal squat? So I'm kind of excited for the future because I think that's where a lot of performance coaches are headed, is doing more eccentric strength training in their cycles, like basically kind of like what Cal Dietz popularized, but almost better because you're doing like an actual overload stimulus there. It's not just a slow eccentric. So I think both approaches work. If I was training elite sprinters, I would probably do a lot of what Rolf does, just because the sprinting itself is so much of the stimulus, and they can't really tolerate doing high volumes of plyos. So what Rolf's stuff does is a way to keeps the nervous system revs up. It still revs up the nervous system. It doesn't add too much muscle mass. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing for sprinters. And it's tolerable, like he said on our podcast. Like it's better than plyos because they can do more volumes of it. They can do it with very high intent. They're still getting eccentric loading. They're getting loading in very specific ranges of motion and like time parameters or time constraints. And they're staying healthy and relatively fresh, so they can actually sprint. Like imagine being able to sprint 90% or more of your true velocity, like almost all year round. Like that's a surefire way, and you're getting incrementally stronger in one of your, highly transferable lifts, as Bondarchuk would kind of say, like your high transfer training. So you're getting stronger in a very specific lift that translates well to your event, like sprinting. And on top of that, you're also getting very high quality sprint reps. And like if you stay healthy, that's a recipe for success. But doing a lot of general strength training can be very fatiguing. It's fine for guys who aren't fast, because like for me, I can still do general strength training and I can still sprint twice per week, and I'm still probably going to be within 90% of my max velo because I'm just not that fast. And I'll still cut down strength training volume to like up some sprint or plyo volume like I did a couple months ago. But but don't sleep on general strength training either. Like if you're asking yourself, am I strong enough to start Rolf start yet? Like, am I strong enough to really start Rolf stuff yet? The answer is probably no. I'm not, I probably won't start doing a lot more of that specific training until, I'll do it at the end of my macro cycle. But in terms of making that like an integral part of my programming as a whole, I'm not going to do it for another couple of years. Like I want to hit, a 300, 315 deep front squat before I'm like, okay, I'm really strong. Like let's mess around with some more types of loading and just see what happens. So, but TBD in that, I think we're going to do a lot more stuff with it. But we got to learn what works for our jumpers first before we start rolling it out to our athletes and even to somewhat ourselves, because we got to kind of piece things together. But we'll see. Favorite meals. I'm a big pasta guy, just like chicken and rice, chicken Alfredo, lean beef sauce with spaghetti and cheese. Those are my favorite meals. Some of these I can't even read. Running squat focused programs. Running a squat focused program for a week intermediate. Yeah, that's fine, dude. Like a squat's going to be a huge bang for your buck. Like if you get, like I've told a lot of people, like, dude, just get strong and jump. And, regardless if you're doing power lifts, like if you're an intermediate athlete, you're probably going to see gains from that. But, once you start to see those gains kind of slow down from just doing very, very basic training, that's when you got to start implementing some of the models, some of the periodization. And that's how we level guys up from like a high 30s vertical to a low 40s, from a low 40s to a mid to high 40s. You can get a 36, 38, maybe a 40-inch vertical just doing, 5x5 back squat and jumping twice per week and sprinting twice per week. Maybe mix some plows in there. But if you want to get to like a really elite level, you're probably going to have to do more of a very more planned and specific approach. Especially if you're not naturally a freak. Like if you're not like Isaiah, or I should say, if you are like Isaiah, because Isaiah is not naturally a freak athlete. He worked for everything he's gotten. If he's like, if you're like Isaiah, then yeah, you need a very specific plan to get a 50-inch vertical. Whereas if you're like Donovan, who's a freak, you just need to stay healthy and you just need to keep seeing those metrics climb up while you're staying healthy. And, just don't crash the Ferrari or just steer the Lamborghini, as they say. And then, of course, we still use very specific means with Donovan too, which makes it even better. But but it also depends. How long before a season do you give 100 and 200 meter sprinters speed endurance work? I implement speed endurance very, very soon. I would start like block one would be like ACEL, max velo, and then maybe 1 or 2 tempo days, like as a kind of a GPP, just to get you in shape. But once you're able to do, like once you have a decent amount of running volume under your belt after a couple weeks, then you can pretty much then I would just cut out tempo or maybe do 1 tempo day. Like if you're going Monday, say you're sprinting Monday, Thursday, Saturday, then you can do a tempo on Tuesday. But that Saturday can be speed endurance, dude. Like just go right into it. There's no set thing that I need to see for you to start doing speed endurance. As long as you can tolerate it and as long as you're healthy, and also as long as you're seeing your speed gradually climb up. If you're sprinting 3 times per week and you're just getting trashed along with lifting, then 3 times per week might be too much for you. And then you might just need to do 2 times per week with ACEL, max V, maybe do like a speed endurance, just like 120 at the end of your workouts as your speed endurance work, and just call it that. If that's all you're able to tolerate at the current moment, either health wise or just neurally. Is Darius Clark a muscular or elastic? Darius is 100% an elastic jumper. Somebody actually asked this in our school community that I happened to see today, which is I never check school, so that's interesting. That just coincidence. He's a definitely elastic jumper. I think they said I forget which athlete asked it, but they're like, well, his standing vertical is 48 and his max is 51, so he's a muscular jumper, right? No, because Darius tested his standing vertical on a just jump mat, which inflates your vertical by probably at least 6 inches, maybe even 8. So he's well within the range. Like we're probably looking at a 41 or 42 inch standing vertical and then a 51 max vertical. He's definitely elastic for sure. And I would also say specifically with Darius he's a freak of nature. And his jump technique still isn't like optimized. I still think he could jump higher right now if he maybe like an inch or 2 higher right now if he knew how to use his momentum even better. Like it's pretty good, but like if he would perfect it to where like Zay or Donovan or Kilgannon is, like he could probably like he's so freaky, like he could probably jump an inch or 2 higher. I mean, it's obviously speculative, and I would not change it now because it's probably too late, but I think you would see an even bigger gap is the point. Like he would probably be a 12-inch plus guy. Pause. He would probably have a 12-inch difference between his standing and his max vertical if he had like the most efficient jump technique possible. Length of a normal training block is 3 to 4 weeks. How to get a faster block foot? You got to cue it, and then you also got to push at the right time. Because if you time the push correctly, then you're going to get a reflexive response in that hip flexor to be able to recover the leg. But if you like push too early, or if you try and overextend and push too late, then you're going to have too long of a lever to swing back to the front, or you're just going to not get in that long split position, and you might recover the block foot late or on time, but you'll be a lot higher up than you need to be. But it's kind of a balance between a penultimate step and a penultimate jump. Like it should feel like a jump. Like a really good jump feels kind of like almost like a 12-inch depth jump. And you're kind of like free falling down into the jump. You get a bunch of kinetic energy. You're already low because you're in this like long split position. And then the block foot quickly recovers and you just bounce right up. Like it feels like a bouncy ball, and it feels like you're pushing the whole time. Like it feels like you have no eccentric phase, even though when you watch the tape back, you're at like a 90-90 position at the knee and the hip. Dumbbell box jumps or power cleans for 2-footers. Was this rage bait? I'm gonna go with power cleans. during a volume cycle to increase work capacity, do I increase power work volume too? Yes. Usually I increase power, or we will usually increase power work volume. But really what we manipulate a lot, or what I like to do it with some of the guys that I train like personally within THP, is I'll manipulate the density. So I'll do like power clean EMOMs, or a cluster set sort of thing, with the power work. Usually EMOMs is about what I'll do, like doubles or triples every minute on the minute for 10 to 15 sets at like a 70 to 80% ish load. And that by itself, just manipulating your rest intervals and your density, can work really, really well. Like having more power density, as you call it, or repeat power ability. Having that slight fatigue is really good. Is really, really good for motor learning, because it kind of forces the brain to find the most efficient movement patterns. As long as you're strict with technique, obviously you can't let technique just go out the window and like actually find compensation. No, you want to find like the most optimal movement patterns for that specific sensory motor package, as Bosch would call it. Or you can just add, you can add sets of reps. Like you can do sets of 4 on a power clean if you want, and do a lot of, and then do 65% or 70%, and then do 4 or 5 sets. Like there's nothing wrong with that too. How much time would take me to see results on my vert if I have a low vert? Dude, well, for one thing, you could probably change your jump technique right now and jump higher tomorrow. I've seen it time and time again. Like, athlete comes to us on a Monday, here's what my jump technique looks like. We correct it. He practices it like before his lift on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and then by Friday he like increases vert by 3 inches just from like a couple walkthrough or moderate intensity practice sessions. Or maybe he had one jump session, worked specifically on that technique, and then the next jump session the next week he gets like a 3-inch PR. Plus, because he did some lifting, which kind of potentiates him, so to speak. And so yeah, if your vert's 25 inches, like if your max vert's 25 inches, and you just like jump twice per week and work on perfecting your technique, and then on top of that you're just getting stronger. Hopefully you're learning how to do some ollies or doing some sort of power work, so you can just increase your general rate of force development abilities. You'll probably get to 30 inches within a couple months, if that. Like it might even be, yeah, I would say like 8 weeks. It should be 8 weeks if you have a good coach, which is why you should sign up for THP at tptraining.com. A link in the bio. But yeah, I would expect gains pretty quick. And if you didn't get gains pretty quick, I would look at like, what are your sport volumes? What are your life stressors? Are you actually doing all the workouts? Are you actually going hard? Are you actually jumping with max intent? Or are you just doing standing box jumps? Etc. How to get rid of PFP. I've done this, dude. I've answered this question like 30 times. Usually every other day loading, for one. That works really, really well. A lot of guys with PFP, depends how bad it is, but a lot of them can tolerate pretty normal training. Like they can tolerate a clean pull. They can't catch a power clean, but they can tolerate a clean pull. They can tolerate a half squat, but not a deep squat. So you kind of just like regress them a little bit. You just go, okay, we're going to go clean pull. We'll go half squat or a box squat. We're still going to load your quads. I'll maybe throw in 2 sets of failure of a knee extension at the end of that, just working the bottom range of motion, because the top range of motion on a knee extension can be aggravating because you have less joint contact area with the patella at the patellofemoral joint. And oftentimes, like if you just decrease the load, or if you just decrease like the weekly loading a little bit, they don't load every day, they load every other day, like they don't do isos on their off days, and you get them to just bend their knee. Like working on their tibial internal rotation has been huge. Like people ignore it, but it's just a biomechanical thing that has to happen. If you want to bend your knee, your tibia has to rotate internally relative to your femur. And a lot of athletes, they squat with the toes way out, or the wide squat, and they lose a lot of that tibial internal rotation. They lose like true pronation abilities, and that just causes concentrated loading on certain areas that can hypersensitize all the tissues. Like you have thousands of nerve endings in your knees. It's a lot more sensitive area than you think. So it doesn't take much to sensitize those tissues. So then from there, it's just about gradual loading. Let's scale you back a little bit, get your pain down, but we're still improving function. You don't need to be pain free, but we just need to get you stronger. and at a tolerable pain level, and then we'll gradually build you back up. What you don't want to do is just rest for 2 or 3 weeks. This is why you don't go to see your doctor, and he'll just tell you to rest and take ibuprofen. Your pain will go down, but your function drastically decreased. Like your load capacity drastically decreased, or your load tolerance drastically decreased. It almost always hypersensitizes your tissues even more because you even bent your knee for like 3 weeks, dude, outside of like walking or going down the stairs. And so then it takes even longer to get you back up to where we need you to be. But yeah, that's how you fix not fix, but that's how you manage PFP. But I've seen bad cases of PFP, like guys who couldn't walk, like couldn't do a quarter squat. And, once you figure out the right kind of loading schemes for them, dude, I've seen it turn around within just a couple of weeks. Just like going from maybe instead of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, going from like Monday and Thursday for your big leg days, and then Saturday's like a jump progression. That's worked really well. Just that 72 hours instead of 48. And it just takes a little manipulation. And usually PFP warms up pretty well, kind of similar to tendons. And once they learn to start trusting their body, remember pain is an input. It's not pain is an output, not an input, which means it's in your mind. So you can usually get back to squatting and jumping within just a few weeks. But again, it requires a lot of communication with your coach. Like usually guys like on THP that have knee pain, like some of our high level dunkers, some of them have had knee pain for months, but they hadn't told us, and that's not good. And so, but once they start communicating with us, or maybe I'll hop on a call with them and we get some stuff figured out, then I get the right plan in place. They update us weekly, and then we're golden. So I've actually seen that recently with a couple of our guys. So that's been nice to see. Can strength, speed jumpers be saved and get up to par with elastic eccentric jumpers? Yeah, I think, part of what comes from having an elastic jumper, I think it's, first you got to fix your technique. Like you got to figure out, you got to just, you have to pick the low hanging fruit. I won't say yes or no, because usually elastic based jumpers just have a background in jumping. Like they've just been jumping for years, and you can't make up for that, if you're 20 plus years old from what you did, like when they were, they've been doing since they were 13. So I think playing catch up from that sense, you can't make up for that lost time. But what you can do is perfect your jump technique. You can get strong, but getting strong only goes so far until you maximize your physics. Like we say it all the time, you have to maximize your physics. You have to maximize your impulse, which comes from having great jump technique. Even me, like I'm what you would call an elastic based jumper. My standing versus max vert is like 9 inches, but it could probably be 10 to 12 if I had better jump technique. But now I'm maximizing. I'm not doing it right now because I can't jump because of my calf strain, but I have, but now I'm starting to learn how to maximize my physics, and you see a difference over time. So to answer the question, I would say they can definitely get close. If you gave me an Olympic weightlifter and he was dedicated to jumping higher and he perfected his jump technique, I'm pretty confident that, given he probably has a 40 plus inch vert, like standing vert, or off of like one step, yeah, he's probably going to get to 46 plus once he learns the, good jump technique, which might take a while because, they don't usually have a background in jumping. But, if you have the underlying qualities there, if you're lean, if you're relatively light, if you're not like 260 or something, then you can become more of an elastic base jumper, which essentially just means that you have good jump technique and you're able to handle a decent amount of speed going into the approach. You don't break too much and dissipate a bunch of energy by having the plant foot hit way before the block foot. Like that's the cure to elastic based jumping, or that's the cure to muscular based jumping. Is muscular based jumpers, yes, they have maybe there's some underlying capacity, like some capacity deficits there with eccentric rate of force development or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's also just a coordination thing. It's just you need to learn how to jump appropriately, within the acceptable bandwidth, and the problems can, in large part, take care of itself. Like I was talking about this on a podcast today, actually, was you can learn by putting yourself in those positions, you build the capacities you need. Jumpers, yes, we do eccentric strength training to, fast and slow, to do, the super maximal eccentric strength training fast and slow to build eccentric capacity. But a lot of guys can also build eccentric capacity just by taking in more speed into their plant, by being low going into their plant, like on a 2-foot jump, and doing that for months, for years. That builds that quality, that builds that coordination pattern that you need. It always comes back to the SAID principle, the specific adaptation for imposed demands. So you can build capacity through perfecting technique is basically the quote I was going for there. But anyways, there was also one question last week or 2 weeks ago that I didn't answer that I wanted to answer before I forgot. A guy asked, "What do I think I'm ultimately capable of?" That really got me thinking. I think he was talking about jumping wise. So I've officially tested 38.5 twice now. Basically 3 times. I'm gonna count Utah if I didn't cool down because of my thumb thing. I think I probably could have touched another 11:10. So basically 3 times. I've had flight times in very, very close to in a 40-inch vert. So I have, high 30s, probably 40-inch vert at some point. I think I can for sure hit 42. Before Father Time catches up with me, I think I'll for sure hit 42. And I think ultimately my ceiling could be like 44 is what I think I could. I think I could get there. But time isn't necessarily on my side. I think I'll get 42 for sure. I'd be really happy with 42. I think I could probably maybe get 44, but I have to stay really healthy. Now, if I would have started training like THP in high school, I think I probably could have been a 46 guy. I don't know if it was in the cards for me to ever be like 47, 48. I don't think so. But I think I probably could have been a 46 guy. Sprinting wise, I definitely think I could run a sub 4.840 for sure. I'm figuring a lot of stuff out sprinting wise right now. So I think I'll run sub 4.8 for sure. I think I'll definitely run a 1 second flying 10 meters. So I'll run 10 meters per second. I think I can definitely do that. But again, have to stay healthy. Probably have to stay a little bit fresher with my lifts, which I will be doing in the next few macro cycles. So anyways, that's the video, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week for the Q&A, and I'll see you tomorrow for the feel good lift / calf strain rehab session.